Yo, what is up guys, it's Pedro here, and in today's video I'll be talking about the players that have the most to prove for the Washington Commanders in the 2025 NFL season. There's a lot of them that I can talk about. We'll talk about the three biggest ones, and then I'll talk about some other ones that definitely have a lot to prove. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well so you never miss a video. And shout out to King Sean on YouTube for giving this video idea. If you guys have any ideas, gonna pre-record videos before I go into surgery on Wednesday, just FYI. So if you have any video ideas, comment them down below. I'll shout you out whenever I decide to make them. But let's talk about this. So the Commanders, honestly, they do have a lot of guys that have a lot to prove, and I think one of them is Brian Robinson. This is his fourth season with the Commanders. Has had some okay seasons, has had some seasons. Last year wasn't great for him. He was dealing with injuries. Before he did, deal with those injuries, he was playing pretty well. He was playing pretty well, and that it was disappointing when he got hurt, because when he came back, just didn't have that same explosiveness. Like, I saw some explosiveness from Brian Robinson early last year that I never saw before. So that was encouraging. Like, he had some really good games early on in the season, but after that, it was just pretty, disappointing. And, he did have, why did I look up Brian Robinson? He did have some, fumbles, only two. It wasn't a big deal. It was just that it wasn't a big game. They ended up winning that game, which was great. Looking at his stats, you can see here, played in 14 games, 799 yards, 8 touchdowns, and, had 159 receiving yards, no touchdowns. So, in terms of scrimmage yards, he had a lot, less than he had the year before, and only played one, less games. So, in that case, definitely had a, worse season. So, the yards per carry, where were they? The yards per carry weren't awful. You like to see a little bit better. 4.3. That's just never been a forte of his. It's gotten better actually every year. 3.9 to 4.1 to 4.3. But the yards, in the season, it's been around the same every year. Like, honestly, you look at it, he had 800 rushing yards in his rookie year. The year that he, he got shot, and he still had 800 yards in his rookie year in 12 games. And for him to not basically get over that in 2 more seasons, I mean, this past year had 2 more yards, but like that's basically the same thing. So with Brian Robinson, this is a make or break year. He talked about it in that tweet that I had up. He's got to stay healthy. I believe that is the biggest thing with him. I mean, he played 14 games last year, meaning he missed 3, but he was banged up in a lot of those games. So, the good news for him is they didn't bring a lot of extra backs in here. So it's not like, he has a lot of competition for that RB1 role, but there are some guys that, hey, if Brian Robinson's slacking, if he starts fumbling, if he's just not the guy they want, then they have guys that can replace him. Austin Eckler can, he's had years where he was, workhorse back, at least somewhat. And then you have Chris Rodriguez, who I think's, capable running back in this league, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Bill, JCM, whatever you want to call him, he was drafted in the 7th round, but I believe he's way better than a 7th round player. So you have him that I think by the end of the season he has a real shot of taking over that RB1 spot if he hits as a player. So, there is some competition there. He doesn't automatically get the RB1 spot. If, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt balls out like he has been, then there's a chance he doesn't get that RB1 spot, meaning Brian Robinson's RB2 or, something else. So, again, something to watch out for. Receiving wise, he's an okay receiving back, not awful, but, not the best. He had a really good year receiving wise, 2023, almost 400 receiving yards with 4 touchdowns. Like, that year was very impressive. He, again, 1,100 yards from scrimmage and missed, 2 games. So, that was a really good season from him. Not super great as a runner, but as a receiver, that's very good. Almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Let's talk about the next guy, Duron Payne. Duron Payne, he had that breakout. I mean, he was always playing decent, right? He was always playing decent. His rookie year was really good, and then the next 2-ish years were like decent, and then he had the outstanding year, which was, I'm trying to think, what year was it? Was it 2021? I believe it was 2021. I can pull it up here, but he had that great year, got paid the next year, and then the next season didn't really have a great season. Was okay. This past year was okay. So let's see. It was 2022 was the season he had a great year. I mean, you can just see it. It's crazy the difference, right? 11 and a half sacks, and the second highest was 5. So more than double the second highest sack total he's had. Every year he gets like 4 sacks. That's what he is. And this past season, just it wasn't great. Not that he's awful, but I mean, he just wasn't playing to the caliber that they're paying him to be. Even in his 2022 season where he had a lot of sacks, he was still disrupting the game in other ways. I mean, 18 TFLs, that's amazing. And last year even he had 13 TFLs and 11 QB hits, and this year 5 TFLs, 7 QB hits, and it just he hasn't been balling out this year, or the last couple years. Not that he's been bad, he just hasn't been outstanding, or even like really good. And we're paying him to be one of the best defensive tackles in all of football, and he's not being that. So Joe Witt, Dan Quinn, they've raved about him this offseason, that he's had a good offseason. He's been working hard. He's been a leader, which is great. That's cool. But let's start to see it on the football field. He doesn't have to have 11 and a half sacks. That was a great season, but that's, for a defensive tackle, that's rare. Not a lot of guys do that. You're talking about Chris Jones, who, sometimes lines up as an edge rusher too. Aaron Donald, those are the guys that are consistently able to do that. Dexter Lawrence is getting into that tier. Not a lot of guys that get consistently double-digit sacks. But if you could get 6.5, 7 sacks, and not even the sacks aren't the only thing. It's getting pressure and being disruptive every play. And if he was doing that last year and he only got 3-4 sacks, that's fine. But he wasn't doing that. You weren't seeing him in the backfield all day. So Duron Payne needs to do more of that this season. And I think that'll help out the Commanders' defense for sure. Another guy that'll help out the defense is Marshon Lattimore. Last year, they traded for him at the deadline. I thought it was a good move. A lot of fans thought it was a good move. But he didn't have a good season. He was up and down, and had a good game against the Saints. Had some up and down moments with against the Eagles, but mostly not good. Had a really bad game against the Bucks. The Lions game was decent, but up and down. Obviously was dealing with a major, hamstring injury, which he sat out a lot for, and then came back and just wasn't great, but obviously was pushing through for that playoff push and, the end of the playoff run. But you could tell he wasn't the same player. So let's see what he does this offseason, and really this season. But this offseason's been looking good for him. And, that's what the reporters are saying. He looks different. He looks, like a totally different player than he did last, middle of the season, end of the season. It's just a different guy. So the explosiveness is there. The speed's there. And you could see that in some of the clips for sure. So that is really good news for Marshon Lattimore. And if he, for Marshon Lattimore and the Commanders defense, if he can ball out, then you have Lattimore, Sainristil, and then you have Trey Amos, those three, and then you have really good depth behind that. Jonathan Jones, Noah Igbenogany, like you got good depth there at the cornerback position. So I'm really excited about this room, and I'm really looking forward to Lattimore possibly getting back to that, cornerback he was even a couple years ago. It's really health with him and Brian Robinson especially. Those guys need to be healthy. Duron Payne, he's been one of the most consistent players in terms of health that we've ever had. I mean, 16 games in 2018 and in 2019, and I believe, or 2019 was 15, but I believe those 2 years were 16-game seasons, not completely sure. And then after that, you can just see, 17 from 2021 to 2024. I mean, he's as consistent as it can, as it gets. So that for him is really good. With Lattimore and Brian Robinson, it's a little bit different. And, Robinson plays games, but he's often playing hurt, which, definitely decreases the production that he gives you. So those are kind of the 3 main guys. Some other guys I want to mention, Deebo Samuel, we need to have, he needs to have a good year for the Commanders. He needs to show out, they traded for him. It's more of a, we don't really know what to expect with him, but we didn't give up as much as we did for Lattimore. So that's why I'm not necessarily putting him on the top 3. And then also, Lattimore's been here for a little bit longer, so there's a little bit more pressure on him. But those are kind of the guys that I think, need to step up. I'm gonna probably make a separate video on young guys because that's a separate story. Like Johnny Newton, we need to have a big year from him. Ben Sinnott, he needs to have a big year. Guys like that, even Jordan McGee doesn't need to have a big year, but would like to see some stuff from them. So I'll make a video about younger guys too, but this is more for veterans and stuff like that. But that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy. Hit that like button, subscribe if you guys new, and peace.